another episode of His Wondrous Works. My name is Josh, one of the leaders here at Cornerstone Wirral. The psalmist tells us in 105 that we are to sing praises to God, to tell of His wondrous works, to declare and make known among all the people His wondrous deeds. That's exactly what we're doing in this series of episodes. We are recounting God's goodness, His wondrous works in and through the life of Cornerstone Wirral as we celebrate our 10th anniversary as a church. Over the past few weeks, we've been joined by several people from the life of the church, declaring those wondrous works in and through their lives and all that they've done and how God has used them. Today, I'm joined by Dave and Esther, Chris and Joe, Josh and Caron. It's wonderful to have you all with us, and they're going to be sharing some of their story and particularly focused around the theme of joining the mission here at Cornerstone Wirral. Since we've planted, we've had many people join us. Some have become Christians, some have already lived in the area, but these guys are all unique in the sense of they particularly joined Cornerstone Wirral, moved to the area because there was something about what God was doing that they wanted to be part of. So guys, I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey Josh. They're all so excited to be here. Beaming smiles. We're so excited to hear how God's been working in and through you. So I'm going to start with Dave and Esther because chronologically you came first.
We did, yeah.
In this journey of people. So tell us a little bit about why you ended up on Wirral and what were some of the things that led you to come to Cornerstone Wirral.
Well, our story actually starts before Cornerstone Wirral even begun.
What? There was a time?
There was a time, yeah. So Esther and I got married 2010. Got that right? And actually, we probably did things you shouldn't do when you get married. First is that we didn't have a job, either of us. And within 2 weeks of getting married, I got a job at Unilever with a recruitment company, Unilever, in Gloucester. And my boss was based in Port Sunlight in the Wirral all the way back in 2010. So probably once a month or so, I would be going up to the Wirral for work. Probably before you guys had even. Yeah, it was
2011 when we moved. Yeah,
2011 before you guys moved. So that was my first experience of the Wirral. And then maybe, what was it, 2 years later, maybe, we wanted to pursue maybe what God had in store for us as a couple, as a family. And we kind of felt that maybe God was calling us into some form of ministry. And we actually applied for an Acts 29 internship. So Acts 29 at the time, there wasn't very many Acts 29 churches in the UK at the time. And basically the way the internship worked was you got placed anywhere in any church that was around. And interestingly, the people that were doing the interviews at the time for the Acts 29 internships was Steve Robinson in Liverpool, obviously where we were applied out of, and John Hindley, who was in Norwich. And we ended up, not our choice. We ended up actually in Carlisle. So we ended up in
Carlisle. Can you read anything into the fact that they didn't take you?
And they send you as far to the far corner of maybe. Neither of them chose me. I don't know. Send me as far north as possible. So
was there none in Scotland at that time?
I think there was a time. No. There was only about 6 in the whole of the UK. And that was about as far north as we could have gone without hitting Scotland. So we moved there. It was great. So, and I did that part-time while continuing to work with Union. So I was still traveling down to Port Sunlight at the time. And that was really good. We did an internship there. We learnt loads. It was a revitalised. They weren't planting a church, but they were revitalising a church. And we learnt a ton from the walking shores there. It was good. And then that kind of was coming to an end. And interestingly, as a church, we were praying for another Acts 29 coach, and that was Cornerstone Liverpool at the time. And we were hearing about the fact that this small group of people were starting a church in the Wirral, which I thought was quite interesting, obviously, because I worked there. And then I met you, Josh, I think, at an Acts 29 conference. I think in the October. So the church must have been about a month old when I met you. And I thought you were an intern as well. And I think that was the first. Did you ever? And I said, "Oh, you're an intern as well." And you're like, "No."
I tried to send you as far south as possible.
you were like,
but I was so desperate for people.
So I think that was the first time we spoke, and then and then we.
It's only because I looked so young back then.
You did.
I clearly
you did look 12. You did look really young. The youngest church planter ever.
You did look young. So yeah, and then we were kind of asking what's next. So we'd been part of a church which was been revitalized, and we really felt like God was calling us to, what does it look like to be part of a church that's on mission, a new church. And we joined you guys in the September. No,
we moved down in November 2014.
November 2014. We've been down a few times to visit, if I remember rightly. Stayed in your house in Port Sunlight. Met you guys, come to visit the church. I think there's a few things that really struck out to us. I mean, we had this real desire. We were thinking God was calling us to plant a church ourselves as well. And I think the thing that really captured us initially was just this real desire for mission. So I think when we arrived here, we were just like every time we came to visit, unless you guys were doing it deliberately just to sort of put on a good show.
You may have been.
Like there was stuff happening and people had this real urgency and real desire to do mission, and mission was part of that everyday thing. And I think that was really infectious, I'd say. Yeah. Really, it was a really thing that kind of appealed to us. So so we moved in the November.
It was like 30 weeks pregnant with a 1.5-year-old.
And with the 1.5-year-old, yeah.
Yeah.
Great time to move.
I know, yeah.
Do it all once.
Yeah. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
What was it like for you, Esther, moving?
Well, I guess like that could have been quite, and I guess it was a hard move because we didn't have any family around here. So it wasn't like we're like, about to have a second child and I've got a toddler and, life is hard naturally at that phase of life. But it wasn't like I had any family around here to help me. But like when we met you guys and we could just see your heart, there's the conviction to live life on life and stuff. I knew we wouldn't be like isolated and alone, but that we'd be part of a family that just did life all the way through the week, not just on a Sunday. And that was just really just amazing. I just love that. And it was so exciting to be like coming down and join you guys. But it was such a confirmation for us. I think when we look back and we were like trying to work out where we were meant to what we were meant to do next after Carlisle and what God was like had in store for us. I think when we then look back, I was like, even from like 2 weeks after we had got married, God had put a pin in the Wirral for us. And even though we'd like Cheltenham for 2 years, then we were in Carlisle for 2 years. Yeah. It was like God had just from the very start of our married life went, Wirral. It's going to be the Wirral. And so when we could then trace that through, I was like, okay, even if I feel a bit nervous about this move and doing all this, I was like, God's got this in plan. He's always had this plan for us. I feel confident to go and just trust him. And that was just amazing. I was so glad that we did that.
That wasn't always what you thought. You were worried that your kids were going to have Scouse accents.
Yeah. Don't send me there, Dave. I was trying, so from when we got married and then Dave was looking at this at 29 internship, I was like, yeah, look at these southern churches. Yeah, let's go south. I like this. I'm from Birmingham originally. So I was like, yeah, let's just keep going further south in my life. No. And then that God put us far up to Carlisle. I was like, okay, let's just break all those idols. But no, God was so good in that season of life. And it was great.
Well, it's been great hearing that story. I'm going to move on to Chris and Joe. So you guys then came a few years later. How did you guys end up here?
Yeah, I suppose our journey started before even hearing of the Wirral. I had never heard of it and didn't know where it was. We had for several years been in Stoke-on-Trent in the Midlands. I'd been working with UCCF, working with students, and over those 5 years that we were there was very much a heart for mission. And very much a heart and a growing emphasis on the need for churches, that God uses churches for his mission to make his name known in and around the whole earth. I had read a number of books, so Tim Keller's Centre Church book, and was convinced that we needed to plant churches in city centres. And so I started to embark with some friends and start planning and scheming as to how we would maybe plant a church in an urban area, an up and coming urban area where there was no churches, where there was no gospel presence. And at that stage, we were looking at Salford Quays. So Media City, 100,000 people moving into that area, from nothing, from a really deprived area to a really affluent area, young professionals, media experts, and no churches. And so we were of the opinion we were going to be going there. And we loved Acts 29. So we kind of grew up in our student years seeing Acts 29 from afar. There was a number of times whenever we got married, Joe's sister was in Cornerstone, Liverpool. And so it was by God's ordained sovereign plan that we would sometimes end up in Cornerstone, Liverpool, getting a feel, getting a vibe for what a church that plants churches looks like. And that excited us. If we could, we would have moved there. But we lived in Newcastle upon Tyne at the time. Yeah. So that was too far a distance to travel for church. We were all about local church. So whenever we were coming to the end, I was like 30 and still working with the 18-year-olds, and it was becoming really difficult for me to keep up. So as much as
it was grey hair.
It was the grey hair. As much as I loved working with students.
Because you'd worked with them for 5 years.
Yeah. And it was really my 6th year because I did a gap year with them as well. So it's like, it's time for me to hand the baton on to someone else and to move on. And our thought was young professionals. And so we went through the Acts 29 assessment. And it was through that time that actually the assessor, who was our lead assessor, was able to kind of help us see that maybe working with young professionals, working in a urban center with, like, we had Joshua at the time. So he was about how old?
Joshua was about 2 and I was
heavily pregnant
in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy with Isabel.
Yeah. And so we were thinking, we're going to be moving into an apartment in a tower block in the city center, and not realizing that actually we had we always struggled with city center church. We didn't know how to do mission well in city center church. We were all about community. And do you want to add stuff?
Yeah, I think we would just, So I think the feedback from that Acts 29 assessment process was really, really helpful, because where we thought that we were going to be going actually wasn't really in our particular gifting or passion. And the advice was actually we would probably flourish more in a sort of suburban area, like down the road from a school with loads of families and things like that. And also it was just really helpful kind of when you have a passion and a desire for ministry or church, local church, but you don't really know what to do with it. It was really confusing for us. So actually coming through that Acts 29 process was really helpful, because it clarified a lot of the direction in which maybe God had for us to use some of that gifting, in particular for Chris, and what that might look like. And you've missed out like a key point of who was our Acts 29 assessor.
I was holding on to that thread. So
sounds like a very wise.
Yeah, it was a very, very wise assessor. So Josh was our assessor. So I think it was your first time being an assessor for Acts 29.
I don't know what I was doing.
In his first assessment, he decided to try and poach us. No, he was like, hey, come and, like, we don't think that the urban context is good for you, just as Joe was saying. We think a suburban context. We've got something going on in a suburban context. There was a number of other assessors there who were like, go check out Josh's church, see what it's like. Go check out other churches as well. And so we kind of... We wept uncontrollably on the way home, going,
what do we do?
Why, God, what should we be doing? And then it was actually Joe's mum. So we had left our kids with Joe's parents.
Joshua,
And the other kid was with you the whole time. And we got home and we were just like talking it through over the dinner table, and we were spending like hours just talking and catching up and reflecting.
Yeah.
And Joe's mum said something that stuck with me the whole time. So we were at a church and we had prepared then that we would be leaving, that we would be going and planting. And she just came out with the kind of the story of Abraham and Isaac. And Abraham was prepared. He had everything ready to sacrifice Isaac, but God had something else in store. And at that last moment, which was at that assessment conference, God totally changed and said, look, actually this.
Yeah.
And so
that was really like comforting, wasn't it? It just made us feel like we must have spoken to mum and dad for about 4 or 5 hours after we got back, and just that just really kind of settled our hearts.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
The whole thing.
Absolutely.
In order to kind of just rest in that moment of where we were, and then just being able to step into kind of praying more about like what maybe that would look like. And I think, so that was all in the January. So then like, because you had offered for us to come to Wirral to stay for a weekend in your house, like these guys, and kind of meet more people in the church and kind of hear a lot about your vision and your values at Cornerstone Wirral. We came about a month later, didn't we?
Yeah.
In the February, and stayed. I think we must have asked you, shared loads of questions during that weekend. We were like, yeah, but what about this? Like, how do you do this? And you and Annie were very gracious and answered all of those questions.
Did you guys get the tour of Wirral?
Yeah. Not the scenic version. Residential home. All the houses.
Okay, so we got the tour of Wirral.
We got a tour of Wirral.
Like we really like, we need to do mission here. We need to go here.
Yeah, that one.
We got
And do you know what? That won it for me. That was like, this is a church that is actually about mission, has a strategy for mission, has a strategy to plant churches, not kind of pie in the sky. It wasn't just words that they said, but it was actually, they were all about doing this. And that was what convinced me that this is what we needed.
I think
this is what we had been looking for.
I think
like
that's the
10
thing.
years.
It had been what we were looking for. And we had all these like ideas of what we thought church and how church should be functionally lived out week on week, day to day. And we couldn't pin it down how it was done, like practically. And then it was when we came for that weekend in that February, it was so helpful because we were like, this is what we have sought and desired and longed for in a church. You know, it's the mission, it's the heart behind actually seeing people come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And that was actually happening. It wasn't just a hope for, it was actually happening. And also like what you said, Esther, like doing like life on life, not just going to church on a Sunday and then for a Bible study in the week. Church can be so much more than that. And we were able to chat. I remember that weekend I chatted to you loads, Esther, and over like takeaway and stuff. And it was so amazing hearing your experience since you had moved, and just being like, this is something that we were really excited about and wanted to kind of be a part of. And so we took that another month to kind of pray about it. We went back to our church in Stoke-on-Trent and we chatted through it with the elders, and they were like, asked some really helpful questions. So then we decided to move, kind of halfway through March. We were like, we'll make the decision to move. But I was due to give birth to Isabel at the end of March, beginning of April. So anyway, so we decided that we were going to move, and I saw a job advertised up in the local hospital, but I was coming up to my last week of pregnancy, and I was like, I'll just phone them and just say. And so I was like, I'm about to give birth, but we're moving to the area. Is there any point in me applying for this job? And they were like, yes, do it. So I was like, okay. So gave birth to Isabel. And then in that first week, I hadn't written a job application for like 5 years. So I was like, right, well, I've got to do my personal statement and things. So in between breastfeeding Isabel, giving her to you and to my mum, I was like doing my job application. And it's like, this is the point where we're like, God was just opening up all these doors to kind of confirm that move to come here. And so had a job interview when she was 3 weeks old, got offered the job on the same day that I had the interview. It was just like just bizarre, but it was just another example. And then
we put our house on the market before it even, I think it was on Rightmove for 1 hour.
No way.
It got sold.
Our neighbours opposite came over.
Our neighbours just walked over.
Just
it wasn't even a board outside our house. It was that soon.
Wow.
And our neighbours came over and was like, oh, I just saw that you're selling. We really want to buy it for the asking price, cash.
And they were like, can we come and see it like now? And we were like, well, just give us an hour just to like tidy. So we just got all the toys, all the bins,
all the
chucked them
stuff
in the car. Isabel was asleep in a bassinet and they just came around and they were there for 20 minutes, half an hour. And they were like, we want to buy a house. And we were like, okay, fine. So then I came up again a few weeks later. You weren't here and I just showed you a house on FaceTime.
Yeah, it's a theme. I at least saw it on FaceTime.
and I saw it in person and was like, should we buy this one? And you were like, yeah, okay.
Let's do it.
So we put an offer in and that all went through. And then the final thing was your job.
Yeah. So you got a job in like that. I spent like 50 applications. like we were moving and I still didn't have a job.
It was like a week before we were due to move and you still didn't have a job.
And then I think it was probably one of the first applications that I did. I got a response back in July. I had no idea what it was whenever they responded and asked me to interview. I had like Dave, you were in HR. I had no clue what I was interviewing for. I had to do some research, and it was probably the worst. It was in those days where they were going to do a Skype interview, and then so I was all ready. I had like my shirt and tie on, and then they're like, "Oh no, Skype's not working, so we're just going to do phone." I was just like, ruined. But I got offered that job. I think a week before we moved. Yeah. We moved on my birthday.
Like, I'm just going to make you like, depends on me just a little bit longer.
Oh man.
But he was so faithful in everything. And I think that's the thing throughout all of it. We were just like, well, God, you're obviously taking us here. And with every step along the way, we'll just trust you with that process.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then as we got here, it was a matter of not only seeing the mission and the strategy and the desire to see churches planted and revitalized. It was seeing that gospeling of one another. So I was in that gospel culture that was being lived out. It wasn't just talk, it was real life. And that just captivated us. That won us over even more as we arrived and started to fit ourselves in. And
I think just doing life together is a perfect opportunity to be able to speak that gospel truth into each other's lives so naturally, and doing that discipleship, not in a formal construct, but just through community and friendship. I think that, we've just loved that, haven't we? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. When did you actually move?
1st of August, 2017.
It was your birthday, wasn't it?
It was, 30th. I moved to the Wirral for my 30th birthday.
Happy birthday. To the house you've never seen.
I left all my friends that I knew and moved to a brand new place. Yeah, it's a good day.
Into a house you'd never seen.
Into a house I've never seen,
What birthday surprise?
Great birthday present.
I got a house.
It's like an epic birthday present.
And you got a Colin the Caterpillar cake from my sister Jen, which was just perfect.
That's what anyone needs.
And then I had to go all the way to Belgrade to meet Josh in 2018, April, Acts 29 conference. Tell us a bit about how you guys, from that point, how do we end up with you guys here?
Well, maybe it's a little bit helpful to go a bit before that. So
everybody else has just ignored my questions.
Just all want to share like our whole history.
It'd be rubbish if I said I met Josh on a weekend and then we never went back. One moment with him's all you need for life.
The world sells itself.
The world sells itself. No, so when I went to uni, I ended up in an Acts 29 church down in Loughborough, which was amazing. I had a really great time there. And then after my third year, I did a placement at Airbus. So Caron was already living in Chester, had you graduated then?
Just about to, I think.
Yeah, so Caron had just finished and was living in Chester. I got a placement. So then we're looking at where do we go to church. And just after I'd got confirmed my job at Airbus, the church I was at uni got given some funding from Acts 29 to fund someone to go along. And I was very fortunate to be asked to go. So
you didn't even have to pay to go?
No, I didn't. You paid for me to go.
Been paying for it ever since.
Yeah, and then so went to the Acts 29 Europe conference in Belgrade for a weekend and met yourself and probably quite a few other people who I didn't put faces to names since. And we had a chat, and then I think I came down one weekend to visit Caron in Chester and came via Bebington. And I remember watching football with you and Mike Knowles, I think. Can't remember. It was a footy tournament on at the time. And then I guess I kind of coerced Caron to come to Cornerstone initially. I was kind of really captivated by seeing the gospel lived out in community and seeing that overflow of the community of Christians being attractive to those around them. I'd seen that at uni, and then kind of said to Caron, we need to be in a church that lives out the gospel like this. And so I'd kind of made my mind up that we were coming to Cornerstone.
Caron just needed a tour of Wirral.
And then I brought to the Wirral and the Wirral sells itself. Fine.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm really disappointed. I never got a tour of the Wirral. So, but
We'll sort that out.
yeah, there was just, I guess lots of things that kind of like looking back, we can see God's kindness. So Josh's placement in Airbus, originally, Josh wasn't coming to Airbus. He was applying for lots of places around the Midlands because he wanted to stay in Loughborough because he had a lovely church there. And at the time I was quite flexible in jobs and things like that. So, but you weren't successful for those applications. And so kind of together we looked at what was still available, and Airbus was one, and I kind of probably coerced you to come to that one as well. So yeah, I guess at the time we didn't quite understand why, but we kind of thought that was great that we had 2 years of living a little bit closer to each other than we had. And then I remember waking up from after a night shift sleep one day, and Josh arrived and he was like, "Oh, we're going to a gospel community group tonight." And I says, "What?" I said, I've just got out of bed. I was like, I thought we were on a nice little night in. And he says, "Oh, we're going to go to this gospel community." And I was quite reluctant. I kind of, didn't know what to expect, and guess was a bit nervous. And we went to Dave and Esther's, and I remember walking in and thinking, why are they all so friendly? And that's not because I've been in churches where people weren't like that, but I guess I'd heard and like seen a lot of Josh's experience of his church in Loughborough, and I could see that he was so captivated, and actually like the way in which he'd really flourished in that church family. And I guess part of me wanted that too. But yeah, I guess I was maybe a little bit more reluctant to start with. But yeah, great decision. And yeah, God was really kind, and job opportunities and things just kind of felt at the time like they were fitting into place. But yeah.
So Josh, you then had a year back to finish your degree. Caron was staying here. And then you guys had a decision to make, really, in terms of getting married, where you're going to live long term. What kind of things were you thinking about then?
Yeah, so at the time I'd finished my placement and gone back to uni, and I'd interviewed at the end of my placement at Airbus to kind of stay there as a grad, do like the intern to grad transition. But then when we were planning our wedding, obviously COVID happened. So that all looked all the way through my degree. When I kind of moved home to finish my degree remotely, all of the communication was the grad scheme's still on. And then about a month before it's due to start was kind of, oh no, it's not going to happen. It might happen next year, but we're not so sure. And I think really Kaz had been living in Chester and still coming to Cornerstone, and we were really kind of convinced that Cornerstone was where God was putting us and where we wanted to stay. And so we made the decision to rent somewhere when we first got married, didn't we? Stumbled across a really nice flat in a little village on the Wirral, and kind of like moved here on the basis that Kaz had her job secured and I would just find something and we would make work fit around that.
He's missed the bit out that we actually signed the contract for our flat in Williston at 1 a.m. on the morning of our wedding because we had nowhere to live.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's leaving on last minute.
The final bit of wedding.
We were coming to live in your spare room. Everyone else has.
So we decided to move here and just kind of commit to the church in the Wirral. I'd like really felt at home and involved in the church family, really well supported. We got lots of connections from work and other social things, and really felt like we had an opportunity to share the gospel and be part of the church in kind of every sense and be supported in community. And and that involved staying here, involved me doing a bit of door-to-door sales around Liverpool for a couple of months in the winter. That was character building. And then God very graciously provided an opportunity for me to come out of that and go into normal work with my job at Toyota. And that was, has then just been a blessing. It's meant that we've been able to kind of put down roots and buy a house here and just commit to that community of people that we're involved with, and all of those connections around us. Yep.
Yeah, it's been great to see that your guys' journey and all of your guys' journey. It's been a joy over the years. It's felt like it's taken a couple of years to get to the end of those 3 stories. But wonderful nonetheless.
Is this not the 3-hour podcast?
Extended highlights. So as you've all been here, and it can look shiny on the outside, but the reality is being on mission together, life on life. It's messy, it's hard, there's challenges, there's joys, there's highs, there's lows. As you reflect on your time, we're starting with you guys, Dave and Esther, like how you guys grown and navigated those joys and challenges of that mission?
Yeah, there's been lots of highs and lows, I guess. It has been a bit of a roller coaster. So I think going back to, not to continue with our story for too long, but going back to our story, I guess when we arrived, we had a real heart, and I guess our eyes were really set on actually planting a church ourselves out Cornerstone Wirral. And we started that process. First of all, there was a real heart to move to Eastham and have a church in the South Wirral, which was kind of part of the vision of the church, wasn't it? And we were looking to plant a church out of there. And just before COVID, we started a small congregation there, which was going to be Rooted Church, which we looked to plant. But a whole host of things happened that were beyond our control. And probably 6 months, 9 months later, we realized that actually we needed to stop and come back to Cornerstone. And that was really hard. And it's interesting in the midst of it all. And I think you said recently in one of our sermon series, often we think, so the passage that kind of was the passage that launched us was from Ephesians 3, which is, we've been doing a passage in prayer. And the end of that passage talks about God's going to do more than we can imagine. Mm-hmm. And when you are that kind of excited about church planting, you've got this, hundreds of people are going to become Christians. You're going to see all these people be saved. We're going to change South Wirral. And you said something quite profound, because I probably preached on that passage more than any other passage. And you said at the end that we often think of that, of God changing people out there, but actually what we forget is often God is actually more about changing us in here. And that really stuck with me, because actually I think what God has been teaching me through the process of it all, through all the highs and all the lows of it all, I think all my desires to be on mission, to see people, they're good, but often it's like, what amazing thing can I do for God? And actually God's like, no, what amazing thing am I going to do in your heart? Mm-hmm. And there was a moment in the midst of it all, I think in the midst of lockdown and COVID, I was reading through John's gospel, and there's a bit where John the Baptist is, and this is just stuck with me. I don't know, these profound moments when just reading God's word, and it was like God was speaking to me directly. And John basically, as he almost sort of sums up his ministry, he goes, speaking about Jesus, said he needs to increase, so I therefore need to decrease. And I was like, that is the ultimate lesson that God is teaching me. It's not about what amazing thing I'm going to do in South Wirral and Eastham for God. It's actually about, is our life as a family, is our life as a church, as a gospel community, actually making his name and his fame, and it's about him and his glory. And that really is the ultimate lesson. And that's been really hard. I won't lie. There's been times where I've been in tears learning that lesson. And I'm still learning that lesson. But I think for all of the kind of that excitement when we arrived, and all the buzz of being on mission and all the highs and lows, actually of all the things that God's taught me, that is the thing that's kind of I want to hold on to the most. And my prayer now is, and my joy now is, when you start walking in that, this is the thing that I find really profound, is that you start to actually feel the tangible blessings of God and the grace of God in other people's lives. So when you're caring more about him increasing and you decreasing, when you're sat and people are praying with you, you start going, you hear that person in GC praying for the first time. You're just like, wow, they're getting to speak. I'm getting to hear my sister or brother speak to Caron, to my Heavenly Father. When you hear about someone becoming a Christian and you're not part of it, you get to enjoy that even though you're not part of it. When you hear about something else going on the other side of the world that it's got absolutely nothing to do with you, you actually start to enjoy it. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? That God actually does give us this tangible thing that we get to enjoy, but he often does that when he's humbled us and brought us to the place of realizing that it's not really about Cornerstone. It's not really about me or Rooted Church or whatever else we planned. It's all about him. And I guess that's the lesson I'm going to continue learning for the rest of my life.
I think we're all learning that. Like, we've walked with you guys in that, and you guys have had to walk through some difficult moments in the midst of that.
Yeah.
God's not only refined and taught you that, but also us as a church. You know, the flesh wanted that to be successful and to go and to send it off. But actually, as you say, it's the greater thing that God has done is not just what he's done in you, but in all of us as a church, as we've journeyed that way. Yeah. And actually all of us are now reflecting, reminded, spurred on, persevering on, recognizing that it's not about how strong we are, but how God works his strength through us. It's not about the success that we are, but actually it's his work in and through us. And the most successful thing is seeing one another grow up into Christ and more people want. Actually, it's, as you say, it's not about the name of Cornerstone, but his name. As you guys reflect on that, you know, I would suggest that most people, when they've experienced what you guys have experienced, are deterred from being on mission and wanting to be part of that again. Like, how have you guys reflected on that process, getting to the point now where like you still feel the rawness of that, but you're still prepared to go, that's still the right thing to do? Like, how have you guys processed that? How do you find yourself in that moment?
Yeah, this is like definitely something that's really resonated with me recently. Like, I think as a church, which has been great, we've been really like focused on, okay, let's really think, where are we going? Like, looking at 10 years, where are we going? What let's go back to like the purpose of what we've been, like, this church started. We're a church that wants to plant churches. This is like what the Bible is calling us to do, what God calls us to do. And I absolutely, completely agree with that theology and everything. But when I felt that come towards me, like, okay, would you be prepared to go again? As just a general, not that you said that to me, but as a general, like, I guess God's conviction in my life, like, and my heart, when I've like heard it through sermons and stuff. And I've been like, internally, I'm freaking out. Theologically, I completely agree with it, but my head and my heart were not aligning. And I was like, wow, I need to process this. I need to work this out. And yeah, it's been a bit of a journey the past couple of months, just trying to think that through and actually talk to God about that. Like, what were my struggles and stuff, and actually just untangling a lot of maybe some of that mess and stuff inside me that I just needed to understand better, just hear God's voice in it and have more clarity over it. And then sort of and being able to talk to you guys and share and stuff like that. Like, it's amazing to have like a leadership and a team that like, you just like really care for us. Like, and you go, yeah, you guys, you know, you have been through like a hard time, but we love you and we want to walk with you through all of that. And like, and just give you that time to work that out and support you. But yeah, like it's been amazing. Like, one of the biggest joys that I've had recently is actually seeing a new believer, like someone's recently come back to faith. We got to see them baptized recently and stuff like that. And I got to share some of these like fears and struggles that I've been having about like looking ahead of what, of like church planting again, if that was God's will, what that looked like, all that kind of stuff. And I just got to share that with them. And it just really, really spoke to my heart. Like, just like really just, powerfully used by God to like minister to me. And I was just so like blown away. I was just saying, wow, like, you don't need to be a Christian for like 20 years to be able to come out with the best theological answer to deal with the problem. You can just be like willing to be used by God, like an instrument in the Redeemer's hand, to be able to minister to someone. Like, I've been blessed to have been grown up in a Christian home. And she was just able to just like speak so like powerfully, just because she allowed God to speak through her. And I was just like blown away from that. I was like, wow, God, you are bigger than, you know, you can do more than I can imagine. And he cares about the details. And yeah, those are joys in those moments. And God does care about the journey that we go through and builds us up. And yeah, like, it does like bring healing and stuff when there's pain and sorrow. And yeah.
Absolutely. None of that is wasted. None of that labor is in vain. None of that pain is outside of his redemptive plan. It's so valuable. It's humbling, but it grows us and reorientates us around us what's most important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is beautiful to see. So we love you guys so much, and like that journey's been hard and brutal, but it's been beautiful. And like we wouldn't deny what God's done, and we're thankful for that.
He definitely brings like beauty out of the ashes, doesn't he? Like,
Absolutely. So as we all maybe like look ahead a little bit to like next season of the life of the church, what's exciting you? What's on your heart? Like, what's your prayers? What's your hopes, dreams? All looking blankly at each other.
It's like, who's going to jump in first? I'm really excited by just seeing so many of the GCs grow in number through people coming to Christ, seeing so many of the gospel communities and the people in those gospel communities inviting their friends into their life, and then inviting them into the GC's life, and then them starting to come along to things and looking and seeing who Jesus is. I'm going to steal one of your stories, Josh. But like, I love how Josh is reading like the Gospel of John with a friend at work. I love hearing stories like that happening across the life of the church. You're reading with one of our neighbors, and it's just amazing to see that happening across the life of the church. And then seeing the fruit of that as GCs are growing in number, and people, even in their infancy as Christians, are getting it. They're getting the gospel. They're getting mission. They're wanting to share Jesus with their friends and with their family. They're praying like wholeheartedly for their families. And we're seeing growth through new life in Christ and all that brings. That's exciting me, because that's got a lot of potential for church planting in other areas of the Wirral and beyond, because there's a need. There's people who need to hear about Jesus. And so, yeah, I'm well excited by that. No one else?
I think I love that as GCs and just church family in general, I feel that people are really behind me in sharing with my colleagues and friends. I've got a close friend who has been through a lot in the last year, and like GC family, but also just wider church family, have really prayed for her and continue to like ask me how things are. And I think it can feel hard sometimes when it feels like there's lots of opportunities, but perhaps the fruit doesn't come as you expect or as quickly as you expect. But to have brothers and sisters who genuinely have grown and care for her just as much as I have, and are genuinely longing to see her come to faith. I think that's just something that's really incredible when your brothers and sisters get behind you and encourage you and challenge you as to whether you're continuing to share the gospel when it feels hard. It's just a reminder that it's not something we can do alone. It's only through strength in God, but also other believers building you up and encouraging you. So yeah, I'm excited to grow more in that. And I know as a GC, we've not long multiplied. And I think just seeing those like relationships between one another kind of grow and getting to know kind of the nitty gritty of each other's lives a little bit more is something that's really great to kind of know who those people in each other's lives are, and opportunities that we've all got. I'm just really enjoying that.
Yeah, I think we've had that kind of excitement recently of multiplying GCs, and it was sad to leave these guys behind. But just seeing the flourishing of those people has just been awesome, and it kind of really excites me in the future when we've seen people flourish in a smaller GC, and that's why we have the model that we do, and seeing people love Jesus more, love each other more. And love those around them who don't know Jesus as an overflow of a love for Christ, and that just excites me of like, how is God going to use those people? That we're all just ordinary people who most of us do ordinary jobs, and yet God uses us in like the most simple situations where we just show a care for people. There's a lady in our GC who tells of someone in the Countess Hospital in Chester who's not part of our church, but who's a Christian, and people know that he's a Christian because he remembers the names of their kids, and stuff that's as simple as that can bring gospel opportunities, because we're saturated in that community of believers encouraging one another to love Jesus more. I think is exciting to see what God will do.
I think I'm thinking along those lines as well. I think sometimes when you look ahead for the next 10 years, you can be like, we're going to do this like awesome thing or this awesome event or that thing over here. And actually it's like, fine. But actually the really exciting thing is like what you've all been saying is seeing one another grow in the gospel, having their lives change to be more like Christ, slowly, one step at a time, long-term, low-key in every kind of sphere of our church life together, whether it's mission, whether it's discipleship, whether it's that growing in Christ personally. I find that really exciting because I think it's so great. And we've all got stories of experiencing this within our gospel communities of getting alongside one another when life is really difficult, and there's struggles which are really heavy, but yet your brothers and sisters in Christ within your gospel community and across the life of the church just step into that need and that support and help keep your sight aligned to Christ and his plan for your life and his character and his goodness. And like more and more of that is like, it's just really exciting to think about. And just like you guys have said as well, just being able to partner together in the mission that is so important to spread the good news of Jesus. Like it's those things that really excite me. It's like not necessarily big events here or there, but it's the long-term, low-key everydayness of being Christians together in the body of Christ, and just, looking in like 10 years time and seeing how much people will have grown in their spiritual vitality, in their walk with Jesus. And like, it'll be an absolute joy, hopefully looking back in the next 10 years and seeing that.
And I think that's the really nice thing about looking back now, isn't it? I think the nice thing about looking back is you look at people and you're like, wow, God's really changed you. Because we don't always see it in the slow, because it is low key and it sometimes is slow. But then we remember like, oh yeah. And even when we think about ourselves, I think that's one of the things that I love when I think back to those early days. And there was so much good stuff, but actually I'm glad we're here today where we are, because I feel like we have grown and God has been at work. It's not like we're looking back sort of pining for the old days. They were great, but I'm glad I'm here today because God's been doing a work and we've seen that throughout the church, and that's been so encouraging.
Yeah, it just really kind of distills and crystallizes what we're really about as a church. We want to make disciples. We want to mature disciples. And mature disciples make disciples. That's the mission. It's as simple as that. Church planting is just an overflow of God doing his thing. And I think in our naivety, perhaps year 1, 2, 3, we were like, we want to get after that so quick with the right intentions and good heart and all that type of thing. But actually we needed this time, these years, to grow us, mature us, to help us to see what the mission really is. And we've all signed up to the mission. We'll all come in at different points. It's maybe not gone the way we thought it would, but as you said, Dave, like we wouldn't change it. We are where we are, and the Lord's got great things ahead of us. So I'm deeply excited for the future. Praising God for the past. I'm excited to see what he does. It might not be what we imagine, but we trust him with that. And thankful that you guys are with us and help the church be what it is today. We're thankful to God for each of you. Well, that's us for another episode of His Wondrous Works. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you've been listening and watching, then please feel free to like, subscribe, to share it with other people. Continue the conversation. We want to hear from you as well and hear your stories about what it's been like being part of the mission here at Cornerstone. So check back in next week for our next episode. God bless.